horn has called us together. Let me know if you can hear me okay, because I've switched locations once again, and there's always that chance that somewhere along the way, my settings have been messed with. So let me know in the chat. Hopefully, everyone hear me, see me. If you didn't know, I talked about this briefly yesterday at the start of that stream, but I was on a podcast panel talking about OSR stuff. It was a lot of fun. I linked to it. If you look on my Twitter feed or the YouTube community tab, you'll see I posted links to it. Appreciate those guys having me on. It was a really good conversation. I think we went about at least an hour, hour and a half. I guess it's just the normal for me. And this time I didn't have to, I wasn't the host. So I didn't have to have that burden upon me. I could just enjoy being part of the conversation. So that was fun. I don't have any other notes. So let me just get to it. Let's get on to it. As is our usual, we are looking at my RPG Roundup multi-Reddit on Reddit. I have it, normally with the OSR subreddit, when we're doing that, I would set it to hot. But for this one, I set it to new, because I think when something happens with these multi-Reddits, a multi-Reddit is when you've taken a bunch of subreddits and made them into one feed. When you do hot, weird things can happen. Hey, Brian Davison, glad you could hang out. And hey, Null Terminated, thank you for letting me know, confirming that the audio and the video, the gravitativity and the polarity is all working as it should. When you go in the hot tab from some of these, I think you can get weird stuff. I'm not sure what they use, whatever their algorithms are to match things up on hotness, on heat. I think weird things can happen. So I'm going to new. And this is also this. So this, I put a link to the multi-Reddit. I think YouTube has it. Maybe I posted it other places. If you want to get it, it's public. Going to be some tweaking also. I haven't really tweaked it in a bit, but sometimes if I find that we're getting a kind of high, or rather low signal to noise ratio, I might pull one. If you have recommendations for subreddits that you feel like would be interesting, throw that over to me. And then obviously, if you have questions, comments, leave them wherever, and I will try to get to those as well, because I'd like to branch out from relying super heavily on Reddit like we do now. But we got some good stuff in here. And it's also, I wanted to get into a mix of not just kind of OSR stuff, but OSR plus other things. So we get a bunch of stuff. Let's take a look at this one. Need better ambient descriptions. This is needing advice. DM Academy, I've mentioned them before. A really good subreddit. It is 5th edition focused by default, but I think there's great questions put in there, great answers. Tends to be thoughtful discussion. It's not a lot of name calling or just meme dropping. They tend to keep it on point, which I appreciate. This is posted by Guillerme985. Need better ambient descriptions. So I'm quite inexperienced in DMing. I know how to describe lots of things, and I think I do it well from my experiences as a player, but I never needed to describe the environment around. I'm going to run a game in a jungle setting, Brazilian inspired, because that's where me and my party are from, and I can't find good examples to take inspiration from, like describe. I'm not sure what that is. I feel like it's probably an AI tool. Someone knows what describe is, let me know. And any, I think it says any means any help. Well, I think the big thing to do is, first of all, I'm stumbling over myself. First of all, I mentioned before, but I'll say it again. Finding some kind of way, a whiteboard, something where you can just grab inspirational photos, things like that, drop them in somewhere. If you've seen any other streams, I've been using this app called Ouija, Ouija, I guess is how I'm pronouncing it. I can drag images, I can drop them. I think I might even be able to, let me just go to one. There's my wilderness adventure stream from yesterday, but let's see. Is that one? So these are just some ones that I dropped into. I think in my Hex Crawling 101, I actually have some. Yeah. So if you look in here, and look at, they're even jungle specific. I have a board like this. I can find great images. I can drop them in here. And then when I need to look at them in the middle of a game, I can come in. I can have separate boards for different environments. I could probably organize this giant whiteboard to have different environments that I need. I can pull stuff out. So that's great for getting kind of some visual cues. I think for words, I think you just need to do a lot of reading, mark things up, take out if you see a word in a book or an article or blog post, someone you're reading, and it sounds really good. You think, "Ooh, I like that word." Take a moment, write it down, drop it into your same kind of whiteboard, and then, keep track of it. And then over time, you'll build up a vocabulary of your own. Think of authors that you really like. How do they describe stuff? Write that down. If you like kind of Tolkien style, Tolkien is great because if you just like that detail, because he'll get into what kind of trees they are and all this stuff, which I think some people find laborious, but I think just even if I don't know what a holly tree looks like, the fact that he knows he's dropping in there just to me just I feel like puts me in the scene. If there's other authors, your George R. R. Martin's, I don't know if his descriptions of foliage or whatever environments are great, but whoever you like, old, new, ancient, modern, pick out those words, highlight them, write them down, put them on your phones. I'll sometimes will just drag or copy and paste stuff into my phone's notes app, and then I'll try to remember to pull it out later. Anything you do to keep track of it, and then you'll come up with a vocabulary, and you can plunk them. I could start writing words in here. I could paste them on top of the image, something verdant. I like the vines that are I'm not sure what I would come up with these crisscrossing vines, but I like to give things kind of somewhat of an ominousness. So I'd call these vines kind of snaking or webbing, something to kind of indicate how they're filling out the space and almost trying to trap things in there, blocking the passage. That might be one way, or blocking the your trail or your road. So I might look at stuff like that. So it's really just about coming up with that language, but you kind of have to do the work yourself. I think it's fine to look at AI tools as your first step, but even then I'd want to refine whatever an AI tool gave me, because you really want to find your own voice and not just whatever the AI thinks is your voice, or what the AI's voice is. It's probably not going to be, especially now in the kind of I doubt there are many AIs that are tuned to writing role playing game type descriptions. So it's a great first step. Take a first pass, get something out of it, but you'll still want to go through and do some of the work. And I think I don't know. I kind of think that a lot of questions or things about jamming or playing comes down to, at some point you got to you got to put in some work. Like any other hobby, any other game, you got to learn it. You got to set it up. You got to tear it down. You got to put in there's a little labor involved. And I think in this case, that labor is spending a few minutes going into some kind of internet image search and going through and finding your inspiration that way. Finding vocabulary. I love to go into things like dictionaries, the really good ones, or the one like the Merriam-Webster. I also like the etymology online, him online, and looking at word origins, and then also gives you related words, and then you can kind of take a word that you like and find similar words, maybe words that have a better feel for you. Thesauruses are great for that kind of thing. Really just kind of got to do that work. It'd be great maybe if there was a tool that did it for us, but I feel like our experiences would be poor because each one of us would just end up talking with the same voice because we'd all be using same AI tool. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. DH says that they use Describe. All right, so what does Describe do? Search a keyword, find a few results I like, then edit them as I want. All right. I suppose we can. Whoa, Queen. How do you spell describe? DSCRYB. Okay. Oh, so describe is literally for game masters. Okay. Unlock incredible value. No roles necessary. Receive lifetime access to your scenes by choosing the hero annual plan. Save up to 33% and access everything with a hero plan. All right. So they got a lot of stuff. $80 per year. That's not, I mean, I'm not sure everything how they do. I might have to see if I can get, maybe I'll see if someone wants to, if I can get access to this to do some kind of detailed look, because I guess it might be useful to people. Let me know what you think. Seems like there's all kinds of one of these prints, character illustrations, $200 to almost $600. Interesting. Let's see. So be ready for the adventure you plan and the one you least suspect. Access all collections and features. So those are places, monsters, spells, items, characters, dialogue, Enchanter Academy, planes and deities, nature, vehicles and mounts, player scenes, scene and character request, way of the word, maps and descriptions, integration with Foundry. That's cool. Lifetime access to your scenes. And then it's $7 a month. All right, so and then just the note, if you do go for that $80 a month, whenever any scenes you make, you get, even if you kill your plan. Cool. Cool. So maybe I'll reach out to them. DH says that there is a free. I won't. I'm not gonna. I'm not going to. I will bookmark. I guess what I'm gonna say is I'm gonna bookmark this for something. Maybe I'll reach out to them, see if I can get some kind of access to check it out temporarily or whatnot, and see what it's like. But I'd never heard of it before. That's pretty good. I still think I would just read, write, find stuff out in the world. I mean, these tools are great, but I mean, no buts. That's a great tool. Seems like it, but for me, I just think reading the stuff, reading your favorite kind of Appendix N stuff, and pulling out the things that speak to you. I guess you kind of kill two birds with one stone, since you get to be reading stuff that you like or love, and you can also get some of this work done in terms of increasing your vocabulary for your game. But cool, as they say. All right, nothing in here yet. So that's my advice to Guillerme. You can see how, depending on where you live, that could be expensive. DH says, I'm not that creative, sadly. I'm good with process. This works well to inspire me in ways I otherwise wouldn't. Cool. I mean, that's the thing, right? I find the process that works for you. Absolutely. I would never want to throw shade on a process that works for somebody. Now we're back. Or did I upvote Guillerme? I did. What else have we got here? And of course, if you see stuff, and I'm scrolling through here, oh, it's not AID. It says literal authors write these descriptions. Okay, well that's good too. I'm gonna see. I'll see if I can get access, or maybe the free one. Maybe I'll reach out to them and see. And then I can do kind of a full episode going through it, because it seems like it's interesting. What have we got here? As usual, if you see something in the chat and I have crossed or I've passed over it, but you think it's a good source, or you've read it and seems interesting or whatever, then let me know. A Lost Woods maze puzzle with a twist. I'm not really interested in puzzle. Beyond dynamic dungeons. Beyond +3 magic items. Plan. Here we go. Plan your clip. All right. Let's check this one out. Also from DM Academy. This is, so the last one was asking for advice. This one is offering advice. We'll see what the author Govika, see what their advice is worth. So the title of this is Plan Your Cliffhangers and Keep in Mind Your Players' Personal Lives. It can cause so much damage. Hey all, just offering some wisdom from my most recent mistake about poorly planned, quick cliffhanging endings. In short, don't have cliffhanging endings to sessions when it derails what you had just said would happen. And don't cliffhang. Is that a word? Cliffhang? And don't cliffhang. Or I just lost my whole space. Where was I? And don't cliffhang, quick end the session that can undercut raw great opportunities for RP. Also, be mindful of players' lives outside of your session. Out of game backstory is one of the players is expecting their first baby this month and will need to take some time off. I decided the best way forward is to have a time skip and take a break between sessions. It would be a great time to have one-on-one role playing with the players while also taking a break so the player can spend time with their new family. In-game backstory is the party just became part of the country's council and agreed on which important tasks they will do. I told them we will have a time skip, and these tasks they choose will occur during that. During the meeting, though, an adversary to the PCs made an ominous remark about an NPC in their party who was a very dear friend to the PC who was expecting a baby. At the end of the session, the party went back to their room. They thought we would end there and be done. Everyone had work the next day and needed sleep, and we'd already exceeded our agreed time limit. But upon entering the room, the PCs found the decapitated corpse of the NPC the adversary mentioned. Then I ended it. You might be tempted to think, that's a hell of a cliffhanger. I think you can see that no, it isn't. The actual reveal is good on paper, but it was very poorly executed and planned and ultimately fails when considering all the surrounding elements. This is not good for the player that needs time off. This is the most egregious to the player expecting a baby. That player expecting the baby who cannot afford more sessions will have this unresolved on their mind for who knows how long, or make a session at the detriment to their new family. Bad, bad, bad. By ending the session immediately, I stole valuable RP time. This is most egregious to the players. Since this was online, we had to get off work for the next day. Not had to get off for work the next day and just couldn't stick around when the PC found out her friend had been killed. She excuse me, she, in a state of shock, tried to put the head back on and cast some spell that wouldn't work. The player said, I know this won't work, but I want to cast a spell anyway. Beautiful. Unfortunately, I didn't give that moment time to breathe because I cut it off due to everyone's work the next day. This could have been exceptional RP time for all the PCs, but instead I pulled the rug out hoping to give a cheap thrill. Oh no. At the end of the session. All right, I saw that my video went out. Hold on a second. I've had to do this before. I'm sure I will have to do it again. So switch to that. Then switch back to that. Okay. I feel like once a stream now, this thing's just doing this dropping off on me. And I do not know for the life of me. I can't figure out why. Also looking around at my glasses around somewhere. I put my glasses down and as usual, can't find them when I need them most. Okay. Back to this article, if you will, this post. This could have been exceptional RP time for all the PCs, but instead I pulled the rug out hoping to give a cheap thrill at the end of the session, though beforehand I didn't consider it. Cheap. Bad, bad, bad. I stole their agency. This cheap whiplash is most egregious to everyone, myself included. I had told them, let's have a time skip, then knowingly dropped the bombshell on them. They had expected to go one way, but I railroaded or forced them into another. They would do a disservice to the NPC to not seek who did this. It would be completely unrealistic and insensitive to simply go about with what I had said would happen. So instead of having a time skip, now they will be wanting to investigate this almost forcibly with time the one most affected cannot afford. Bad, bad, bad. The whole situation could have been handled better in so many different ways. The death can't be recalled without some metagame reworking, which poses a problem as the adversary in the council already made remarks about the NPC who was killed. It's a tedious and confusing and frustrating situation. GMs, please do not disallow crucial role playing and don't use cheap jump scare type endings unless you really think about it. And above all, make sure you keep in mind your player's most valuable currency, time. Don't be like me. I actually think this is a really good piece. I'm always, I mean, look, I'm someone that is on YouTube talking about stuff to do with GMs, but I'm always sometimes with these folks on the internet, it can be a little bit like, ooh, I wonder what they're going to say. Like I've said before, I feel like DM Academy is pretty strong in this regard. I think we won't tend to find people just throwing out stuff that seems ill thought out. And I can always appreciate someone giving advice, not as a look at me, what I did so well, but look at be not me. Look at how I messed up and how I can learn from it. I think that they're all really good points. Part of the thing I think with not necessarily the critical role type thing, I wouldn't want to lay it at their feet, but the trying to emulate streams and kind of media things like that is this where to end my session. I should end it on this note, keep them coming back. I think that gets bandied about. I think way too much. I don't a role playing game, as much as people want to bring in TV show and movie and novel and different kinds of media tropes, it isn't the same as those other mediums for a multitude of reasons. So trying to shoehorn some of these some cross media tropes in there, cross platform, cross whatever kind of tropes, I think oftentimes is misplaced. And I think this idea of the cliffhanger, sure, it's fun when you get in on a cliffhanger. I'm sure in the moment this person had this idea of, okay, we're just going to end and it's going to be a quiet ending to the session. It'll be off. I'm sure they thought in the moment, oh, you know what? This would be really cool. Let's end it this way. And this will keep them like really raring up to come back and play. And yeah, they didn't think about these other consequences in the moment. I think that happens all the time. I'm sure I've done a number of things that if I had a chance to think about it just a little bit more, I would have thought, yeah, it's probably actually a bad idea. But you're kind of blinded in the moment by what seems like this great concept. So you run with it. I mean, in the specific things, right? You've told the players meta wise that there's going to be a time skip. So yes, then giving them something which they're going to feel like we can't time skip. There's an active murder investigation now. We can't just time skip 2 or 3 months. We have to come back to it. For the first one, I think is maybe the least. Not that the. So, like maybe they just have a very. I guess I don't want to downplay this because I don't know their game, but being left on the cliffhanger and having a couple of say they're taking a month or 2 months off. That to me is not terrible. I don't think they're going to lose sleep or somehow their time with their baby. I imagine that as soon that when that baby comes, all of a sudden you do the baby. After a little bit, you're not thinking about this cliffhanger in the game. Like that to me is not a big deal. If it had been a cliffhanger that worked with the time skip, I think that would have been a lot better. It's a different kind of you know, cliffhanger. Cliffhangers at the end of seasons of TV where they know you're gonna have to wait all summer. I mean, it's kind of what you want to happen. So that one, I don't think. I think to the extent that that's bad, if it's because now the rest of the party's not going to want to take that break, but if it's just, well, they're going to be thinking about it. I mean, the thing is, the meta thing you do is okay. Now we're not going to take instead of doing a time skip after that month, we're just going to follow up right in the moment. Like that's kind of the recovery thing you do is say, okay, well, we're not going to time skip. When we come back next month in November, we're just going to pick up with the investigation kind of thing. So you can recover, I think, fairly easily from this. But other than that, I agree with uh, with with the advice they're giving, I guess, built off of their experience, right? And I would just say ultimately, don't worry. People worry about that stuff like, oh, how do I structure my sessions, this or that. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. Sure, it's fun if you can end it in the right, find that right moment to end it. But sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Sometimes the players and what they're doing and what you're doing and all the events that are taking place just don't lend themselves to having like a great ending. It just doesn't. You spend too much time arguing at the beginning or things draw off. The combat that would have been great to leave is shorter than you thought. So you're an hour ahead of time. You thought, oh, it'll be great if we can have this combat and then we'll end. But we've got an extra hour of time. And I have no problem if you find a great ending spot and it's a little bit early, end it. If we're scheduled to play 3 hours, but then at 2 hours and 50 minutes, you're at your perfect ending spot, I just end it because I just say to them, yeah, we could play for another 10 minutes, but there's kind of more going on. Like, I don't want to rob you of your time and start something and then have to stop. So we'll stop it here and then we'll pick up. But if I had an hour left, I'd be like, no, we're gonna keep moving. Um, the time management or the trying to play your time management too much for having this kind of like, aha gotcha whatever moment, not worth it for the most part. Just play your game. But I think that's good advice. Don't be them. Think about your cliffhangers. And I think the thing is that the one of the things that can happen if there's a downside to being kind of improv heavy, this can be it, where you can get caught up in the moment and then you do something and you had forgotten about this stuff because you were kind of moving too fast. You're too much in the moment. You decide to run with it. I think, as I've often said about a lot of things, just slow your roll for a minute. Just slow down. Like for this situation, okay, so the NPC starts talking bad about bad NPC starts talking bad about good NPC. They don't have to make their move that night. Slow your roll. It takes time to prepare stuff. Takes time to do stuff. Just let it simmer. And if you'd thought, okay, I'll let it simmer, then this wouldn't have come up. It came up because you had a great idea and you couldn't let it rest, let it let it breathe. And I think when you have these moments and you let them breathe, so here this NPC has made some declaration. Now during this downtime, what's happening when the players come back? There could be rumors and things that sort of play into the fact that this NPC may now be plotting. Bad NPC now is plotting to take out good NPC, and you can work that into a lot of stuff. It just makes for more interesting options for you. You just give things give things time to settle. It's probably more rare that someone says something bad and then immediately goes off and murders that person. It just looks too obvious. Part of the reason why bad NPC probably just wouldn't say a whole bunch of bad stuff to good NPC and then immediately kill them is because it would seem obvious to everybody that bad NPC did it, and they probably want to avoid that unless they're super strong in the setting and they can just kill people with impunity and forget law. They're going to want to figure it out. They're going to want to let it lay low. Oh, I'm going to let this guy think I'm cool now, and then I'm going to, poison his lunch or whatever. Okay, back to Ita. Let's see. So we got that one. Got that one. Eldritch Sight tips. Definitely not concerned about mechanical stuff for 5e because I don't have anything to offer. Let's see. Let's go to the next. Well, you know what? Actually, I'll hit the new tab one more time, and then I'll go to the next page if nothing. Nope. All right. Moving on to page 2. Probably get rid of homebrew. Just not that interested in it, especially 5e homebrew at this point. What are some tips for making your own tabletop RPG? Oh, that's like a whole series of streams. New bestiaries for Dungeon Fantasy RPG from Gaming Ballistic. That's cool. I'll give them a thumbs up. Running a city under attack. I think we've seen versions of this, but we'll check this one out. And it's got some comments. This was posted by probably Carl back in DM Academy again. DM Academy also has a lot of traffic, so you get a lot of content in there. Hey, sorry if this has already come up, but I've Googled a bit and couldn't find anything to match. I am planning a big event in my next session. The party is in Baldur's Gate, currently in a basement, about to find some guards and then some story and loot. They don't know that the city is about to be attacked by a bunch of cultists, kobolds, and a blue, green, and red dragon. The objective for the party is going to be to go to a villa where the attackers are focusing their attentions and make a stand against the dragons along with the other strongest heroes in the city. I'm planning for it to seem like chaos to the players, cultists and kobolds coming out of alleyways and attacking and then retreating, flaming fists firing ballistas into the air, and then the dragons raining down lightning, poison, fiery death from above, buildings collapsing, etc. Then the players they were enemies with before the attack joining by their side to defend the city, etc., etc. Basically, I have about a dozen set pieces that I can drop in at any point as they try to cross the city. I have NPCs ready to encourage them to defend the villa where the NPC can tell the dragons are focused. In a way, it's sort of a chase scene going from one part of the city to the next, and then a bit of a last stand. Just thought I'd throw it out to the world, though. Anyone tried anything similar to this? Any advice or concerns? Well, I don't know that I would. The thing is, like, the objective for the party is going to a villa. Who's giving them that objective? Because to me, that you I guess here's my philosophy, right? You're running a narrative type game, and this is fairly linear. You have to look at, if we're going to run it as being linear, because my first instinct is to just let them be in the city and let them pick up traces that they'll should be able to, once things are under attack. At first it's going to be chaotic, and then messages are going to be sent, and there's going to be people relaying things, and there's going to be this concept of, the heaviest fighting's over on the west side of town. Okay, what's happening here? Now there seem to be this one quarter or this one neighborhood seems to be getting the worst of it. You can kind of allow them to have that feeling of it's open, they can go anywhere, while sort of funneling them in a way to where you want them to be, which is finding the one villa which has the MacGuffin or the NPC, whatever that they need, and kind of put them in there. I'm guessing that this person's saying, okay, they're going to go now and they're going to find some guards, and the guys are going to say, head to Villa Arabesque for whatever reason. It doesn't make sense. I'm going to assume that in terms of the narrative, that this is information that the guards will have. Were they sent to find the party? I don't know, but there's a part of it where I go, okay, if I'm going to keep it in the narrative thing, so I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to just give them the streets. I want them to be on this pathway. So first problem I need to resolve is, what happens if they say no? If they, for whatever reason, maybe even because of stuff that I said, this is a swig of, what is this? Iced tea for the working man. If the guards say, hey, go to Villa Arabesque, and they're like, nah, I feel like we want to take out these goblins or these kobolds first, the cultists over here first, and then we'll think about the villa, but that's step 2, something like that. Or just, no, we have our own idea. What do you do? How do you get them over to the villa? Because I think when you have this kind of linear sort of chain, right, each of those links can be kind of brittle. And the first one is, well, how do you get to the villa? Maybe the guards are in a position to order the party to go to the villa. I don't know. That's what I would look at, is who's an NPC who these guards could be working for. Hand them a letter, a quickly scrawled note or something that someone of authority to them can tell them, get your butts over to that Villa Arabesque. like pronto, 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 something like that. So I want to make sure that whatever that hook, whatever that prod is to get them going that way, get them out of the basement, get them running across town, is running. The chase scene part you could do in different ways. If you want them to keep moving them, you could use it as a skill challenge if you wanted to. You probably don't want to just have it just be combat, because you're if you're in combat, then you're moving in tens of feet, and it's just taking up a lot of it's just gonna take up a lot of time if you have to do combat all the way across the town. It's just gonna take too long. Or if it's combat, I don't know, you don't even really do you I don't even see how you could give them really a short rest kind of breather, because they're the tension of the moment is supposed to be that they can't waste time not moving. So any resources you ask them to use up during that chase element, they're not getting back. Or I mean, I would just assume that you're not. Maybe if you get to the villa, there could be a break in the action. I would definitely have some kind of break. Maybe at the end of the chase, there's a break, a little bit of that breather, and then the dragons show up. It just makes for a cool moment. Like, wait a minute, why is everybody stopped? You're kind of in the eye of the storm sort of thing, and then whoosh, and then fire, lightning, poison, all that stuff comes down. He talks about having a dozen set pieces. I don't know how many sessions you want this to take, but I don't think you need a dozen set pieces. I might have, if you look at, I don't have a map of Baldur's Gate, but I presume you're going whatever neighborhood they're in, moving to other neighborhoods. I might have some kind of set piece, or some kind of give them some kind of visual, maybe a situation, a scenario as they're moving from one neighborhood to the other. Okay, you're in the dockyards. This is what happens there. Now you move to the merchants district, and maybe something a little bit different happening there. Maybe the cultists were coming in like little rowboats into the harbor and up into that area, that district, that docks district. But now in the merchants area, kobolds and some other things are kind of running wild and crazy. Maybe they're all setting fire to stuff. They're doing their own mischief, and then maybe you move, and then so that becomes a visual, that becomes maybe a scenario if they want to think about it. Can they stop some of the fires? Can they cause some of the kobolds to retreat? They have some choices to make, or do they keep hustling and just running through? And then maybe there's one more. I don't know, depending on how many neighborhoods. I don't know the layout of Baldur's Gate, but maybe there's one more as they get into that whatever neighborhood or district the villa belongs in, and that can have its own thing. There might be a neat scenario where they have to get inside the villa. The villa itself is being besieged as the city is under siege. So then you have enemies outside, and the party has to try to punch through. Maybe that would be kind of more of a combat, and then give them a little bit of a break as like, oh my gosh, what's happening now? And then the dragons come down. So I would probably do something like that. But ultimately, what I think I would prefer to do if I had my druthers would be to kind of give them the town, and then use things happening around just to kind of give those cues. And maybe if they're not going to the villa, then maybe at some point, messenger, guardsman, somebody comes over and says, "You've been asked for at the Villa Arabesque, get going." But I'd like to give them that sense of the openness of the space. I wouldn't be necessarily wanting to plot them out block to block, but I'd give them the opportunity to try to do some things, really bring out the kind of tension of the siege, and then, like I said, try to funnel them towards the place where I'd prefer them to go. But that all said, I would have some alternatives. This is the other thing. They don't get to the villa for whatever reason. Your kobolds are rolling awesomely well. You roll up more cultists than you think. I wouldn't have them, like, if I determine, and I roll some dice, and I say, okay, I make the decision, there's going to be 46 cultists in this area, and I happen to roll 4 6s, so I end up getting a bunch more cultists than maybe I thought. I'm not going to then have them like run away or die soon. It just changes. I'm probably gonna play that encounter the way I would. Now I'll use morale, I'll use reactions to kind of help shade things. But I guess ultimately, if I have this ticking clock of the villa, and the party, maybe even for reasons that they can't totally control, don't make it, what happens? It's not going to be the end. The campaign ends. Oh, you didn't get to the villa. Sorry, it's not a game over. Roll credits. No. What happens then? Where could whoever's in the villa, is there some kind of escape tunnel they can try to get to? Could they try to make a break? Maybe I'd have some dice, a table. I just want to figure it out, because I wouldn't want it to be end. So I'd want to think about, okay, if the beginning of this chain of events is kind of brittle, they might decide not to go to the villa. I might need to push them, or how can I try to ensure that as much as possible they will get to the villa? All the chase stuff just kind of happens. The other side of it is they get too caught up in here, or something happens, whatever. If they don't make it to the villa, or they don't make it to the villa on time, what happens there? Because I don't want that to be a story ender. So I'd want to think about the two ends of this narrative chain, if you will, as much as possible. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. All right, back to the list. The Legend of Dragoon, some Dragoon homebrew. A GM trying to move away from 5th edition, looking for alternatives. I'm kind of curious. This was posted to just the RPG subreddit by Show Me Your Dungeon, or show_me_your_dungeon. Thumbs up. I'm not hating on D&D 5th edition. I've been playing and running it for years and have had tons of fun for the most part. But as the campaigns go on and PCs grow in power, things come up that make me not have as much fun. I can't seem to balance encounters properly. Fights are either too tough or a complete joke. Low-level spells that trivialize character death. Literally no one plays martial classes, etc. So here's what I think I'm looking for. You can suggest a game that checks off at least a few of these points. I'd be happy to hear it. A game that's easy. So here are the points. 1. A game that's easy to pick up and not too crunchy, potentially with familiar concepts to a 5th edition player. 2. Offers plenty of character customization options to players, but preferably ones that enable creative problem solving over doing maximum damage per round. 3. Rewards exploration. 4. And this is the big one, fast, dynamic, and most importantly, manageable combat. Heck, we've had single combats encounters last 3 to 4 hours in 5th edition, which I would not like to become a trend as the players level up. I mean, I would, OSR. The probably where the OSR falls short, I think, for probably a good deal of folks, is in the character customization options. I think that can be alleviated, but I'm not sure which game. I mean, some people say, okay, you could take OSE with advanced options, probably get you there. There's some other games that might get you there, but I think it's another one where if you're willing to put in a little elbow grease, you can really come up with a lot of options yourself. And the thing is, I like about coming out with them myself is I can tailor them to my setting and my campaign so that everything has a nice synergy that you can't really get unless you're willing to monkey with the kind of generic options or the stuff that fits the either implied or setting of whatever rule book you're reading. Ian says, first thing that comes to mind is Worlds Without Number. Yep, that's a good one. I need to go back and read more of that because I read the kind of world building stuff, but I didn't get into their kind of setting and their and other mechanics. I should probably go back and check that out. So Dr. Rotwang, they recommend Index Card RPG. It'll be immediately recognizable to anyone who's played any edition of D&D, and it's so easy to hack into whatever you want to be. You'll be doing it in your sleep. Oh, in combat, she's fast. And then some folks are seconding that one. Mr. Underscore Shad 0O, probably Mr. Shadow. If you want to stick with fantasy, I'd suggest checking out some OSR options and adjacent systems. Yep, that's good. They mentioned Symbaroum, Black Hack 2nd Edition, 5 Torches Deep, Shadow of the Demon Lord. I don't think I have. I have a hardcover of Shadow of the Demon Lord, but I don't think I have it in PDF form because I think that's one I'd like to probably do some kind of reading on stream. Mr. Valiant throws out Savage Worlds. Tagline is literally fast, furious, fun. And then also Fate. And then Calestin Rogue points out Savage Worlds, and then there's Savage Worlds Pathfinder. Let's see what else we got. Rex 218 just points out Pathfinder, just without even Pathfinder Savage Worlds, which is Pathfinder Prime. Level 2 Janitor mentions OSR. Totally Mojo brings up Worlds Without Number. So there you go. You've been seconded, Ian. Zaurish 9 mentions Traveler. Hemocon mentions Genesis, another system I really haven't read. And then, this might be good. Eaten Cheetos made a post about switching from 5e to Shadow of the Demon Lord. Let's check that one out. Let's give them a vote. This was also posted to the RPG subreddit. The title for this from Eatin' Cheetos is Looking to Switch from 5th edition? Shadow of the Demon Lord does everything better. Here are the differences. Okay. Note, Shadow of the Demon Lord was written by one of the lead designers of 5th edition who felt that calling something D&D came with expectations and therefore limited innovation. So he made his own game. 1. Shadow of the Demon Lord's rules are much more streamlined while also allowing for more meaningful player choices. The big examples are listed below, but there's tons of small quality of life changes you'll find as you read through the rules. 2. The class system is far more customizable and easily the most exciting part of the system. You choose a novice path at level 1, an expert path at level 3, and a master path at level 7. The paths are all relatively balanced and have no prerequisites, so you could start as a rogue, but decide it makes sense for your character to branch into magic, and it would be viable. There are tens of thousands of combinations in the core rulebook. Tens of millions when you include all the additional content, seriously. Instead of planning out your entire level progression on day 1 and therefore ruining any meaningful choices later down the line, the system actively encourages choosing your build as you define your character. Third, combat is way more interesting than just martials swinging their sword over and over and casters using the same spells over and over. Martial characters get a ish ton of available maneuvers right off the bat, about as much as 5e's Battlemaster. Casters get castings per spell instead of spell slots, so they can't use the same spell over and over again. Instead, they'll have to be creative and use their whole arsenal. 4. There are hundreds more spells in Shadow of the Demon Lord than in 5th edition, yet choosing spells is less overwhelming because of how they are categorized. There are 30 spell traditions in the core rulebook. When you learn a new tradition, you are presented with a digestible amount of spells in the tradition that you can choose from. The system excels in fewer, or this is number 5, the system excels in fewer but more dramatic combats, not like 5th edition where the system encourages having filler battles. 6, the initiative system is fast and innovative, but also adds another layer of thoughtfulness. Each round, players choose between taking a fast turn and a slow turn. Combat order goes players fast turns, then monster fast turns, then player slow turns, then monster slow turns. If you take a fast turn, you can either act or move, but not both. If you take a slow turn, you can both act and move. When you have dynamic battlefields where players have to constantly be moving and a GM who skips players if they take too long to decide what to do, this initiative variant truly shines in all its beautiful elegance. Ability scores have been reworked. Oh, this is 7. Ability scores have been reworked to make more sense. Scores are now strength, agility, intellect, and willpower. It's extremely easy to determine what actions/saving throws belong to which score. Don't tell me you understood the difference between wisdom and charisma saving throws. Number 8, the Boon Banes mechanic is more versatile than advantage or disadvantage and allows for stacking buffs or debuffs in a way that isn't overpowering. When you have a boon on a roll, you add d6 to your d20. When you have a bane on a roll, you subtract d6 from your d20. When you have multiple boons or banes, you roll multiple dice and only use the highest result to add or subtract. Because of this mechanic, we can have things like crazy combat maneuvers while still accounting for their varying complexities. Boons and banes also cancel each other out on a one-to-one basis. So if you have 2 boons and are attempting a 3 bane maneuver, overall it counts as 1 bane. 9th, instead of keeping track of a million little skill modifiers to represent your talents, you simply write down a profession from your character's background. Then, whenever that profession is relevant, you get a boon to your roll. I could go on and on about how skill lists limit player options and creativity, especially since so many players treat the skill list as a verb list, but here we have an elegant solution that encourages player creativity. 10th, the corruption and insanity mechanics are great and can make for genuinely terrifying moments. They can also easily be removed for a more lighthearted game. Additionally, the paths/spells that you actively corrupt you or make you insane are thematically awesome. 11, character creation is lightning fast. You choose your ancestry and professions, roll for equipment, and then you're good to go. I don't think people always realize how important fast character creation is. When I show up to play an RPG, I actually want to play the RPG, not wait until next week. And then number 12, okay, this point isn't related to 5th edition, but I wanted to mention it in case people were concerned. As far as lore goes, it's purposely light and flexible so that GMs have full reign to make the world their own, or you could use a completely different setting with pretty much no hassle. Mechanics are not tied to the initial setting. But if you really like Shadow of the Demon Lord's lore and want more, plenty of supplements exist that flesh out areas for you. It's a win no matter what type of GM you are. So there you have it. I believe that Shadow of the Demon Lord does 5e better than 5e. You can get a free starter guide here. It's everything you need to play at level 0. And then they wrote a buyer's guide for those that are interested. So there's a lot there. I have Shadows of the Demon Lord. Unfortunately, I've only got to play in one game, and that game didn't make it very far. So I only got a taste of it. I can't say I disagree with much this person said, just in my little bit of experience. The one thing that I felt like, and maybe I just wasn't maybe I just wasn't into it. I don't know that I love. See, the nice thing with advantage and disadvantage is that it's just so easy to communicate and do, right? You roll 2 dice and take the highest, take the lowest. I found the boons banes thing not quite. I think the way they wrote it up probably even explains it maybe better than I think I felt like when I read it the first time. Um, I just didn't find it quite as intuitive. And then you got to roll multiple d6s, and I think when you it's like you get advantage on the modifier versus on the roll itself. I kind of feel like just roll a bunch of d20s, especially now when you're playing a lot. So many folks are playing virtually, and who cares if you're rolling 10 d20s with something like, I almost would rather just do that than do the highest. Okay, I'm going to have 3 of these. I'm going to roll 3d6, and I have to take a highest of 3d6, add it to my d20. I found it's a little bit clunkier than I would like. It's not. I do appreciate what it's doing, and yes, it has more granularity than advantage disadvantage, but it does lose a bit of that smoothness. It's a little bit rougher. It's just a little bit clunkier, I think, than advantage disadvantage. But I do agree with kind of what it's doing. Ian says the number one way to make character equipment fast is creation fast is equipment packages. Yes, I think that's true. I think I'd also say just going full rando. Just instead of random species or heritage, random class, something like that. 3d6 down the line, and just do a full package, and then go. Because yeah, I think which class you're going to be, though, that's sometimes going to be a shorter argument, because you kind of fill that out if you're the third person. If someone, it's almost that thing where I think for often whoever figures that stuff first, kind of it gets easier the further you are around. So that you're got 5 players and they're all making characters. As soon as one of them picks fighter, then that's kind of gonna, okay, then everyone's gonna go, okay, well, we got a fighter. All right, maybe I'll be a rogue. And then second person picks a rogue, and that is a little bit shorter amount of time than the first person took. And then the next thing, because they're gonna, you're gonna think like, well, we don't need another rogue then. And so their choices are kind of get diminished. Presumably, I mean, you could have 2 fighters, maybe you want 2 fighters, whatever. But I think that ultimately, after it the the time between the first person figuring their stuff out and the last person tends to keep shortening. I think it also helps if this is where not having a lot of a lot of character customization out of the box helps. I think something like Shadow of the Demon Lord kind of has a little bit of that, because you have, here are your first things you can be, and then there's a second group, but you don't really unlock the second group until you've hit a couple levels. I really like that, and I keep trying to keep working on how I can figure out how I can port that to my kind of thing, because my system, because I do really appreciate that a lot, and it's a little bit gloggy in a way. I mean, doesn't just have like 3 levels, but this idea of kind of having like a little package, a little package, a little package, which I think works really well. It is a good system, and I do want to read through it more. What's the buying guide? Okay, so cool. So yeah, you can. Wow, so this guy's got a lot of stuff. I will save this for later because I am curious about it. I think I might have. Maybe I do have it in PDF. I might have something in PDF. I don't know. Cool. Ian says BX is super fast until you get to buying gear, then it screeches to a halt for 30 plus minutes. Yeah, though I think, yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think the when you're a new player, it is daunting, and that's where the packages come in. I feel like I could equip out my guy in like 2 minutes, because it's basically going to be, depending on my class. If I'm a fighter, I'm going to be like, okay, what's the heaviest armor? What's the best armor I can afford, and a weapon? And then I've got some pocket change. Okay, torches, yeah, iron spikes and a hammer, a water skin, some rations, maybe a bedroll. You can do it pretty quickly. But yeah, I do. Not to say I do really like equipment packages, but I think that they're most beneficial for when you're new to the game. After, I think once you've played a little bit, you could just, I would, I almost would let here have the packages and just pick out which one you want after you've played for a little while. Because you just kind of know what you want. Ian says they have one of those players that wants to analyze every option. Okay, yeah. If you have a table like that, or even one player on the night, then yes, just picking from a random package, much better. Much better. Yeah. Yeah, you want to avoid that analysis paralysis type stuff. And ultimately the starting stuff, it's kind of like, who cares? You're going to find more things soon enough. And if you forget something you need, it just becomes a great moment in the game when you realize that everyone thought the other person was buying rope, and so now you have no rope. A look at armor as damage reduction. Yeah, this might be interesting. Something a little philosophical. This was posted by Beholdsa to the RPG subreddit. This is an AMA, a look at armor as damage reduction. In this, I want to talk about armor. In an RPG, the concept of armor is simple. Wear a piece of equipment or have an ability and make getting damaged more difficult. There are three major ways that RPGs often handle this: armor as damage reduction, DR, armor as defense, armor as ablative hit points, HP. Most RPGs I know of take the first approach. In this approach, armor simply subtracts from the damage being dealt. This is easy and avoids some of the problems of the last two options, but it has its own problems as well. And foremost among them, in my mind, is that it's difficult to balance. The problem that a lot of DR systems fall into is that DR values are very temperamental. Having a DR value too small can make it negligible, while having it too high can break the game, as the character is never hurt. Imagine the case of a character with DR5. If in the game most attacks do 5 damage or less, the character is almost never hurt. On the other hand, if the average damages are 100, having DR5 becomes worth very little. So in this post, I'm going to brainstorm about possible fixes to this. One common solution is to have all hits always do a minimum of 1 damage. In this way, a swarm of attackers dealing small change damage will eventually be able to plink through damage reduction until their attacks add up. How viable this solution is, however, depends largely on typical hit point values. Essentially, it will take many more small attacks at 1 damage each to matter to a character with 100 hit points than one with 5. Another possible solution is to make damage reduction a divisor rather than a subtractor. In this fix, instead of subtracting DR from damage, divide damage by DR. So with DR2, hitting for 10 damage only deals 5. The downside of this approach is that now players have to do division with each hit. Additionally, there's a pretty huge gap between no DR, or DR1, which is the same thing, and the next lowest, DR2. That is, unless you want to make people divide by fraction. A third possible solution is to try to make armor a hybrid approach with other armor systems. DR1 may be negligible by itself, but it may be less negligible if combined with a bonus to defense as well. Or perhaps armor provides a pool of ablative hit points, but only takes the first 5 points of damage from its pool, and the rest come from the character's main hit points. These fixes can be effective, but they also have the downside of complicating the game, since players then have to apply several different effects per hit. The last possible solution I'm going to take a look at is a variant of the first fix. In this fix, instead of attacks doing a minimum of damage of 1, instead each attack can have a different minimum. One can think of the minimum as an armor piercing value. So an attack that does 5 damage minimum against minimum. Wait, an attack that does 5 damage minimum. Oh, I see. So an attack that does 5 damage minimum 2 against DR10 would still deal 2 damage. The downside is that this adds an extra step when dealing damage against enemies with high damage reduction. But on the other hand, it can be made to scale to higher hit point values more easily. Whew. Okay. So there's some interesting stuff in here. I think I like conceptually armor as damage reduction. I've thought about doing that. I've thought about applying this to D&D, or at least OSR, kind of old school D&D games for a long time. Something like light armor absorbs 1, medium armor absorbs 2, heavy armor absorbs 3, and then something like super heavy full plate maybe absorbs 4 damage, something like that. But I never end up sticking with it, because I do think that despite whatever kind of armor class is used in D&D is kind of an elegant solution. I don't think it gets enough credit for being. I do think it's kind of elegant. It just, it does have those weird things. I know that, okay, what does it look like when something hits? some people look at it like, oh, am I now the pincushion knight because all these arrows hit me, so now I have arrows, 100 arrows sticking out? Where I'm like, no, because hit points is not just meat points, so they're not all sticking out of your body, but it's all the stuff that leads you to be less and less defensively sound as a battle goes on. Is kind of how I look at it, which then it does make it hard, or it just adds some difficulty when you're kind of describing things, because you want to impress upon, say, the players if they've done good damage to a creature, but you don't want everything to be a slice, because then the thing would just be, you'd think it would be bleeding out because of all these slices on it. Oh, you've cut it here and you've gouged it here. It's like, well, after a couple rounds, the thing would just be a bloody pulp, but it's not, because some of these things are things that make it uncomfortable, or they kind of they certainly slowed it down, kind of thing, but in different language. But I've always been kind of wanting to use DR in some way. Maybe I'll figure it out. Maybe somebody will figure it out better than me. Jason says, Palladium does a good mix between being harder to land a meaningful hit and the armor not being able to take unlimited hits. Rollmaster also does a good job with its weapon and armor hit charts. Yeah, they actually Chainmail has weapon armor hit charts, which I've always loved. But I've always felt like I don't want to slow down combat. And I don't know if it would or not. Maybe it would. Maybe I don't understand. I don't necessarily think that tables are slower than doing, some version of THACO or whatever. Hit this number. It's a little bit slower potentially, not a bunch slower, but I've always liked that. Then I also started thinking about, well, how much, if I was in a game, let's say something like a D&D version of Pendragon, where most of the combat I'm doing is against other people and less against things that are monsters, I probably would have something like that, because I'd want to, especially something that relies a lot on the kind of romantic ideas of chivalry and one-on-one combat amongst, this kind of sort of equal enemies. And I would love the idea that someone sees someone else in heavy armor and says, okay, bring me a mace, and this other weapon. And these brigands are using light armor, so I want to go with a sword or a spear. Like make those kind of decisions about, I'm fighting this guy, so Squire, hand me my axe or something, or hand me my pike, or whatever it is. I really like those. In D&D though, I always get caught up in, once you get outside humanoid monsters, then how are you figuring all these things out? And is it just harder? It's just more work, more kind of conversion stuff that I have to do about, okay, well, what if you're a creature now and you're given an AC of 4, like what is that? Is it as chainmail? Does that make sense? It might make sense in terms of like scales. Okay, well, scales are kind of like chainmail in terms of weapons, but then something else just might have really hard skin. And what is that? Is that like leather armor? Is that like plate? Maybe it's not plate mail. Maybe dragon scales would be kind of like plate mail, because there's massive scales as opposed to small. It just gets to be like, is it going to be is the juice worth the squeeze? I guess I would say some of that, but it's always interested me. Let's see if there's anything interesting. This is supposed to be an AMA, so are people asking A's that he's going to answer? Burn My Dread says, I would read the damage reduction section of GURPS base set. It covers what you have in a little more detail. It also handles the issues you raised with armor penetration in a systematic way. And then U00888782 says, except swords are just as effective as maces against plate armor, so although it's detailed and systematic, it's not realistic at all. Mr. Valiant says, Cyberpunk Red runs along similar lines. Characters have hit points and armor values according to what they're wearing. AV armor values reduce incoming damage, but every time it's hit, whether the character itself was not, AV is reduced by 1, and the armor must be repaired or replaced during downtime. I think one of the things is the other thing that's, I don't necessarily, I'm okay with just saying hand waving away repairing. I don't know that I want folks to track, or I need to track armor wearing down over time. I'm fine with that just being like, you know what, during your camping time, during your kind of rest time, you're assumed that you've got a little hammer that you can kind of knock out minor dents. I might have something, I'd be fine saying, hey, on some creature or whatever weapon's critical hit, it's damaged your armor, and then you'll need to repair it. But other than that, I don't I'm fine with having a flag. Either it's needs in repair or it's not, as opposed to trying to track more points for it. I don't know that it just doesn't seem super fun to me, but your miles may vary as usual. Ian says they kind of like the as chain style, makes the monster super portable between systems. Yes, it does. I think if you've got a bunch of those, and I think that's something else that chainmail also had, which was the which I think I like, because I didn't have to make as many decisions. Would be you had these different infantry types or infantry and cavalry types, and then you have a monster, and it would be like as heavy foot, as light foot, as medium foot. And actually, what they would do in that system is you had offensive and defensive. So you could say attacks as Lightfoot, defends as Heavyfoot, which would indicate that they're maybe not super skilled offensively, but defensively they're kind of tanky. So you could do that, and I like that because they were very vague. I didn't have to think about get in my own brain a little bit about, is this chain? Is it like this? Is it like that? And I could say, it's as Heavyfoot, but they just kind of had that light, medium, heavy, right, with the armor. But I do like the specificity and the granularity of, this weapon is great against chainmail, not the great against plate mail, not even maybe that great against leather, but chain, it's great. And then if you can scout your enemy and see they're wearing chainmail, go for the weapon that makes the most sense with chainmail. Like, I really like those decisions. I just haven't seen a way that, at least in my own brain, doesn't feel a little clunky to actually get out. And then and because I want those decisions to be important, I want to be thoughtful for other creatures. And that's where I feel like it gets to be a lot of work for me. I mean, sure, I could just go and just kind of randomly say, okay, if your chainmail, if your AC is between this and this, and you're as chain. But because it also relates to other decisions, I feel like I want to be more thoughtful than just saying everything with AC4 is as chain, everything with AC5 is as whatever, everything with AC2 is as plate. I mean, I suppose I could just do that and then find the exceptions as they come up, maybe. But I just feel like because it leads to me an interesting decision, I want it to be thoughtful on my end. Vajala says another way is to make the damage roll using multiple dice against a target number, i.e. the armor rating and or target size / toughness, and the number of successes is your damage level. This makes an armored target harder to damage, but not impossible. It's kind of cool, but I want to see that a little bit. All right, so the last one, because I see we're at time. This was from a purple person. Warning, nitpicks ahead. And so he quotes here, one common solution is to have all hits always do a minimum of 1 damage. And then they respond, depending on what damage means in your game, this could conflict with the fiction of arrows and swords plinking harmlessly off solid plate armor, encasing a mighty warrior. If damage means something more like stamina, that could make more sense. Those hits have momentum and build up to stagger the warrior, then a lot depends on how high your hit point is. I still want a huge warrior in plate to be able to absorb tons of blows from like little pixies armed with sticks. So you get around this, as noted in your last paragraph, by having some attacks have an armor piercing value of 0. And then he quotes again, another possible solution is to make DR a divisor rather than a subtractor. And then they respond, division sucks. It's the slowest arithmetic operation to do mentally, and you have to do it on every attack. I pretty much agree with that. And quoting again, a third possible solution is to try to make armor a hybrid approach with other armor systems. And then they respond, I agree with your concern that this sounds too complicated. I use damage reduction in my game in combination with combined attack / damage rolls. The damage equals the attack roll success margin over guard minus armor. When you block attacks, your guard goes down, but your armor is static. It's a lot of subtraction, unfortunately, but it's not too slow, and it feels quote unquote realistic as far as goofy fantasy combat goes. I've also thought about that too, is making kind of a singular roll for armor, for attack and damage. Okay. All right, we're going to end it. Well, no, we'll read this one. This is also from U00888782. Many types of armor existed simultaneously all throughout history. That means that there was never a single dominant armor. Each had its pros and cons. Why not just pattern armor after real life instead of reinventing the wheel? Rigid armor deflects as armor as defense. Flexible armor absorbs energy, damage reduction. It was never ablative or a divisor in any appreciable sense. So why introduce a complicated construct that has no basis in reality? If armor damage reductions break the game, it means the model is wrong or it lacks sufficient granularity. Usually where these systems fail is that they treat all damage types the same. The damage dealt by a mace is dramatically different than by a sword. How complex you choose to make that subsystem is a matter of taste, but you can't go wrong if you just model real life, because real life was never broken until an OP weapon, aka firearms, made full plate useless. I mean, I don't disagree with what they're saying, but I think with games, you're trying to make something simple, and you get back to, well, sure, I could have all these different systems for different weapons, but then I got to kind of juggle all those in the game, and do I want to do that? I think you could come up with giving something a couple of values, but then again, I got to track. Well, going back to my earlier example of when you're fighting other humans wearing types of armor, then sure, talking about different kinds of attacks. Is it and we already do that depending on your version of D&D when talking about slashing versus stabbing versus concussive kind of blows. Um, sure, great. But then okay, now you're fighting a gelatinous cube. Like what am I talking? Maybe that one you think, oh, that's just to use their example, that's armor as energy absorption. Okay, but now what about this other creature? Is it armor? Is it rigid? Is it flexible? Do I have enough information to really determine as a GM? Is one going to be do I end up skewing whether I mean to or not, something that easier for the players or harder because I'm looking at what weapons they're using? It just gets to be like where I got to make a lot of choices. Obviously, if you're creating a whole game, you can make your own monster manual that covers all that stuff, but just in a on the fly kind of conversion type thing. It's like, do I want to do all that? So I think it makes sense from a game perspective as you want to unify your mechanics, but that does move you into some potentially odd positions from a realism standpoint. Maybe someone will figure out a way to balance it. And I do think that if I was playing online, if I had online tools to do all this stuff, then I would lean into all the granularity, knowing that the online tool, whether it's something like Fantasy Grounds, Roll20, Foundry, whatever, can do all those mathematics and things and just give me a result. Or make it an app on my phone, or a bot in Discord. Jason says the easy way, as much as I hate VTTs, is just to plug all the values into a computer and have it spit out the result on die roll. Yep, that's just what I said. Jason, we are on the same page. I don't necessarily hate VTTs, but I don't use them. But yes, that to me is like the thing that I would love VTTs to do, to take all the awesome just granularity of some of these systems and make it accessible by removing all the barriers of having to do it manually by hand and having it all built into a system. And I don't know why, I'm assuming they haven't done this yet, the Harns, the Roll Masters, these more really kind of gritty, crunchy systems haven't made some tools where it's like, you know what, just you plug your guys in there. Our version basically of D&D Beyond, or some kind of whatever plugging it all into Foundry or Fantasy Grounds, whatever, and that we'll just take all this off your hands. And then we're going to do this. And maybe they probably do this. I presume that they do. I don't know, but I feel like I don't hear about it enough. People don't talk about that when they're running. No one responds to these saying, oh, but if you use Foundry and you're playing Rollmaster, it does it all for you. So I don't know how much they've automated all that, but that's kind of my dream, to make some tools, maybe on a generic level, to be able to automate a lot of the stuff so that you could build these really interesting systems and plug them into your game of choice and be able to run all this maths and calculations to get granular, but remove all the stuff that you need to do if you're just going to do it yourself. All right, folks. Well, we're going to call this one a stream. Thanks, everybody, for joining. If you can give a thumbs up on your way out, that would be awesome. If you found yourself in here and you're not subscribed, and this kind of discussion sounds good to you, if you feel like subscribing, that would also be awesome. If you got here late, you could just head to the front of the stream and catch everything from jump. Other than that, have a great day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. As I'm recording this, it's Friday, so have a great weekend, everybody. Game on, and I will talk to you later. Bye now.